and then another 436 of them were temporarily separated, but they're back with the families because they were taken over to be charged under what we call Section 1325, which is coming into the United States without documentation. So we're talking about a small amount.
So you're down there and you're witnessing what is happening. You're trying to tell us about that. So what are you asking for? What do you want to see done? Democrats are pointing the finger at President Trump and his administration for what is happening.
Well, keep in mind this law, Section 1325, you come in the first time without documentation. That means that it's a misdemeanor. The second time, third time, it becomes a felony. So right now they're charging, this is about a 1950 law that Ronald Reagan, Nixon, Bush, Obama, Clinton never carried this out. They carried it under a civil process. So President Trump is saying we're going to make it a criminal aspect, and if it's a criminal aspect, that falls in the category.
Well, I was asking you about what the Homeland Security Secretary said today, and she said she is faithfully enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. It is up to Congress to fix this. Congressman Cuellar, we thank you for your time this morning and appreciate that you're down there trying to see what is happening and try to make it better. We have now with us Ronald Vitello. He is the acting deputy commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And, Ron, everyone's looking at the situation down there, including the president, and saying this is awful. Nobody wants to see this happen to our children. Nobody wants to see this happen to any children in this world. It is happening. But Kirstjen Nielsen says these are the laws. They're enforcing the laws on the books. They're calling on Congress to fix this. What do we need to know about what is happening down at that border that you witness on your duty every day?
So we're seeing this marked increase since the spring, or since spring started, like your reporters, John Roberts said, 50,000 people every month for the last 3 months, and a huge increase in families and children coming unaccompanied. And we have to find a way to make this border safer. We're being distracted by this humanitarian mission. And so when the Attorney General said we could refer all people that cross the border illegally for prosecution, we started to do that. And that's what we're seeing being played out now.
Kirstjen Nielsen makes her case. We're not separating families legally seeking asylum from point of entry. She started out this day saying, if you are seeking asylum, legally seeking asylum, go to a point of entry. She stuck by that message. She then showed up at the White House to address the press. She says they're only separating if they're not familiar with the relationship of the adult, the child with the adult accompanying them, or if that adult is a danger to the child, or the parent is wanted for prosecution. Are those the only reasons for which a child is separated from the adult or parent with them?
So that's correct. If these groups would choose to go to the port of entry and make their asylum claim there, those are the only circumstances by which they would be separated, where the child was actually in danger or we could not prove the familial relationship. At the ports of entry, if they make those claims, they would not be separated.
Ron, the numbers are staggering when you look at the trend that is happening there. When you see Congress, Kirstjen Nielsen saying this is up to Congress to fix this, you've got Democrats saying that this is Trump's no tolerance policy. You've got Republicans that say that this is Democrats. They're obstructionists to reforming these three major loopholes in the immigration system that Kirstjen Nielsen keeps talking about. What do you see that needs to happen? What do you say to Congress to fix the situation down there?
We've been advocating to deliver on the president's promise for border security, and we're asking for these loopholes to be closed. This happened to us again in 2014. ICE stood up Family Detention Center temporarily, and we started holding people until they got their due process hearing, and the numbers went dramatically down. At the beginning of this year, and the numbers went dramatically down again because people thought there would be a consequence for this illegal activity. We'd like Congress to give us that tool back so that people can be held until their hearing. They can go through a due process that would allow people who are actually qualified for asylum to get it, and then those that didn't would be removed.
Can you leave us off with a thought of these children down there? I mean, right now, Health and Human Services, who takes in the kids who are separated, has been taking in about 250 children per day in recent weeks. They expect to be taking about 250 kids in each day for the next 2 months. They could be caring for 18,500 more children by the end of August, we're told. And HHS was already holding 11,500 children, which means it could hit 30,000 by August. Can you tell us something about how these children are being cared for in these facilities?
I've been to several shelters. They're very well appointed. Medical staff, dental staff. They're places where kids can be safe, where they learn things. There's a schoolhouse on site. The medical professionals, it's clean, it's neat. They have cafeterias. They get 3 meals a day, plus snacks when they want them. It's probably not an ideal place for them to be, but it's a very nice place for kids to be while they're placed with a family member in the United States. Most of them don't stay more than 30 or 40 days.
It is a debate that rages on, and people are looking for solutions, and it's certainly got the attention of this country and others around us. Ron Vitello, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this is a Fox News alert. We've just learned that the House Judiciary Committee intends to issue a subpoena to anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok to testify about that bombshell IG report Friday. Byron York and John Summers here in the news that is just in. Plus, Inspector Horowitz and FBI Director Christopher Wray's hearing on the Hill.
Mr. McCabe, who was insubordinate, gets referred for prosecution, but Mr. Comey, who was insubordinate, doesn't get referred, but he gets to keep his pension and his book deals.
Moments ago, the House Judiciary Committee announcing it will subpoena Peter Strzok. That's the FBI agent removed from the Russia probe after the discovery of those anti-Trump texts he exchanged with FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who was also his lover. If Strzok were to testify, something his lawyer indicated he is willing to do without immunity, it could be explosive, revealing new details about bias within the Russia probe and the future of the investigation. Congressman John Ratcliffe sits on the House Judiciary Committee. He joins us now. Congressman, thank you for your time tonight. So, first of all, what do you think of this news? He's officially been subpoenaed to testify.
Yeah, I knew he was going to appear one way or another. We invited him to appear voluntarily or be subpoenaed. He originally said he would come. Now he's been subpoenaed. Either way, Peter Strzok is a central witness in both the Hillary Clinton email investigation and the Trump-Russia collusion case that became the special counsel matter. And it's important that we have him appear and explain these text messages, as well as his actions taken in both of these matters. And so I'm excited about the fact that he will eventually appear and either answer questions or assert his Fifth Amendment rights. Either way, it'll tell us a lot about Peter Strzok.
And of course, we've all had a chance to see and hear those text messages by now, and we know that there was anti-Trump bias in those text messages, and a lot of it. However, the IG report found that there was no evidence of this used in decision making. What questions do you have for Peter Strzok specifically?
Well, I think that the Inspector General equivocated a little bit from the written word or his written report in his testimony today. He clearly acknowledged that Peter Strzok had an astonishing level of bias, as did Lisa Page and teams full of agents and lawyers involved in these matters. He also today indicated that in at least one instance, Peter Strzok allowed that bias to influence his actions as it related to the recovery of more than 300,000 emails on Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner's laptop that were not supposed to be there. So I thought the Inspector General opened the door today to the expansion of the idea that bias really did impact both of these very important investigations. So, you know, we all want the opportunity to get to the truth. You know, I think that Peter Strzok's credibility ultimately will impact not just the Hillary Clinton email matter, but the Trump-Russia investigation, because, Sandra, the most important thing that you understand here is that Peter Strzok was the person that the FBI put in charge of investigating Donald Trump. The guy that hated Donald Trump as much as anyone, who said that not a single American should vote for him, who promised his girlfriend that he would stop him from becoming president, and then talked about getting him impeached once he became president, was the one collecting evidence, making decisions, formulating an investigative plan against Donald Trump. So he needs to come and account for the things that he has said and the things that he has done, and we're going to make him do that one way or another.
Does it surprise you that Peter Strzok still has a job at the FBI? Obviously, he's been pulled off the investigations, but he's still there, and he was asked about that. The FBI director was asked about that today, and they really couldn't comment specifically on what he's doing there, but he's still there.
I think we're all at a loss for why he's still at the FBI. The best way that Chris Wray can defend the 13,000 agents, many of whom are good, brave men and women who go to work every day to keep our country safe, protect us from terrorist threats, is to hold accountable the really bad actors. And at this point in time, there's no question about Peter Strzok. The astonishing level of animus, bias, and hatred really cannot be ever justified or explained.
And that bias was not just towards the president and his administration. It was towards Trump supporters as well, as revealed in those text messages. Congressman Ratcliffe, thank you for coming on the program tonight.
You bet. Thanks, Sandra.
And the bad news for the FBI does not end there. The agency was roasted by lawmakers and at times by the DOJ Inspector General during a fiery Senate hearing earlier today.
There is a serious problem with the culture at FBI headquarters. There just seemed to be a culture of impunity where the rules did not apply.
I can't believe that this happened to my FBI.
I can't think of something more concerning than a law enforcement officer suggesting that they're going to try and use or may use their powers to affect an election.
Here now is Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor, and John Summers, Democratic strategist and former communications director for Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Byron, you and I have spoken a lot leading up to that hearing today. What did you make of that culture of the FBI?
Well, you had Republicans making their case that the Horowitz report showed extensive evidence of bias. You were just discussing that with Congressman Ratcliffe. You had Democrats kind of clinging to the conclusion that Michael Horowitz did say that he had not seen any documentary or testimonial evidence of bias in the specific decision whether or not to prosecute Hillary Clinton. But basically, Horowitz did say, look, there was tons and tons of bias here, and Republicans took it from there.
You know, John, this is the FBI. The American people, they look on at this and they want to have full confidence in the FBI. That needs to be restored. Will it?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, first of all, we have to remember what we're talking about is a handful of people, not the entire agency of 37,000. And it's sad to see this department, having the baby thrown out with the bathwater on this one, because as Byron just said, most of these agents are hardworking people who work to keep the American people safe. And I don't think anyone would consider the FBI a bastion of liberalism. In fact, one of the text messages, and I remember Byron reporting on this on Friday, actually mentioned that if you ask anyone around us who they're voting for, they'll tell you it's Trump. So while there may have been this culture issue that certainly needs to be investigated, that's not something that should be applied to the entire FBI. And I think if there's one thing that came out of this hearing, it's that there was no deep state conspiracy or plot against the president or his campaign. And I'm sorry that, Republicans don't like it, but conclusions do matter. And if we aren't going to trust the Inspector General, who's supposed to, take this non-biased approach, then who do we trust?
Well, I want to get Byron to respond to that because, Byron, I know that when I spoke to you earlier, we were talking about Peter Strzok and the fact that he's willing to testify, and now we know Chairman Goodlatte has officially subpoenaed him tonight. We could potentially not only see Peter Strzok up there and answering questions to members of Congress, but finally hear the stories. I mean, this could be very revealing testimony.
Exactly. First, on the issue of it being a handful of people involved, Senator Hatch addressed that today and said, well, yeah, maybe there was a handful of people. Unfortunately, they included the director of the FBI, the deputy director of the FBI, the lead investigator on both the Clinton and the Trump investigation. So they were a really, really important handful. Now, on this testimony of Peter Strzok, and lawmakers have been trying for months to get this to happen, I think that there's going to be a lot more than just bias questions about Peter Strzok. Remember, Strzok actually led the Trump-Russia investigation when it was in the FBI from the summer of 2016, in the middle of the campaign, all the way to May 2017, when he joins the Mueller investigation and then stays there until the end of July of 2017. So I think some lawmakers are going to say, look, we know you don't like Trump. We got that. How did this investigation start? Tell us about George Papadopoulos. Tell us about Joseph Mifsud. Tell us about the people who approached Trump employees with seeking information. Tell us about the informants. There's a lot that lawmakers want to know.
And going into this, Peter Strzok, before we even learned of the subpoena tonight, Peter Strzok's lawyer said he's willing to testify. He will not plead the fifth. Do you expect this final word to you, John, to be revealing?
Well, I certainly hope one of the first things he does when he gets up there is provide an explanation to the American people and an apology for what he has done and for casting a shadow on the FBI. But the reality is, you know, you can talk about bias and what led up to the investigation starting, but at the end of the day, Robert Mueller, who's respected by people on both sides of the aisle, or at least was up until this point, when the president has been trashing him on Twitter and in other places, we have to trust that he's doing the right thing here. And at the end of the day, evidence matters. And let's not lose sight of the fact that 13 Russians were indicted as a result of this process. So this investigation matters. It's important, and we should let it go on.
I think that evidence is what the Inspector General talked about today. He saw the bias in the text, but he had no evidence that played out in the decision-making of the investigation.
That's right.
John and Byron, thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, still to come with the midterm elections looming, some Democrats are getting desperate.
There is an inferno raging in Washington. But here in the land of 10,000 lakes, we know how to put out a fire.
And a firestorm of backlash after the Republican National Committee chairwoman says it would be a mistake for candidates to not support our president. Ronna McDaniel will be here exclusively to explain. Plus, the Southern Poverty Law Center admits that it wrongly named Maajid Nawaz to its extremist watch list. Mark Thiessen is here on the new developments on a story we have been following right here next.
They know they've got this wrong, but they're being stubborn. They are trying to save their own face with this, and they are resisting taking my name off. And I think that's they recognize they made a huge error, but it's too late for them to change their mind.
Breaking tonight, the Pentagon confirming late today that plans for routine military exercises on the Korean Peninsula have officially been called off, saying in a statement, quote, the United States military has suspended all planning for this August defensive war game. The announcement comes 1 week after President Trump agreed to suspend U.S. military drills in the region as part of a deal with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And developing tonight, some vindication for a man unjustly targeted by a controversial organization. The Southern Poverty Law Center issuing an apology, a retraction, and a settlement to Islamic reformer Maajid Nawaz after incorrectly labeling and putting him on an anti-Muslim extremist watch list. Trace Gallagher's live at our West Coast newsroom with this story. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Sandra, it's a major victory for Maajid Nawaz for a few reasons. One, it helps to rehabilitate his reputation as a former Islamic extremist who now argues for a peaceful vision of Islam. And two, the $3.3 million settlement will help Nawaz and his Quilliam Foundation continue their fight against anti-Muslim bigotry. In its apology statement, the Southern Poverty Law Center wrote in part, quoting, although we may have our differences with some of the positions that Mr. Nawaz and Quilliam have taken, they are most certainly not anti-Muslim extremists. But critics fear the apology and payout may not be enough, pointing out that SPLC has a history of attacking people, maligning their good names, then apologizing. In 2012, when Dr. Ben Carson said he believes marriage should be defined as between a man and a woman, SPLC added Carson to their hate list for allegedly being anti-gay. The group later removed his name and apologized. But Maajid Nawaz has argued that SPLC is putting credibility and security at risk. For example, in 2012, when the Conservative Christian Family Research Council was added to the hate list, a gunman walked into FRC headquarters in D.C. and shot a guard. The gunman later pled guilty, saying he wanted to intimidate opponents of gay rights. Here's Maajid Nawaz on the story last June. Look.
We often associate violence with far-right neo-Nazis or Islamist jihadists. But in this case, it also with hard and left-wing discourse on the hard left, it's leading to violence, and it needs to be checked. And when you make lists of people in this way, they end up being murdered.
And throughout this pattern of attack, retreat, then apologize, the Southern Poverty Law Center isn't exactly lifting its stature. 3 years ago, the FBI deleted SPLC from its list of legitimate resources on hate crimes. Sandra.
Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom. Thank you. Here now with more on this is Mark Thiessen, an American Enterprise Institute scholar and a Fox News contributor. Mark, good evening to you.
Good evening to you.
Yeah.
Good to be with you.
So I know that this is something that you've been following for quite some time. And to remind everybody, from Trace's reporting, you got this as well. But this list, published in 2016, was intended to serve as a resource for journalists. It was deleted shortly after Nawaz filed this suit. 2 years. Was this a long time coming?
Absolutely, it was. I mean, look, the idea that Maajid Nawaz is a anti-Muslim bigot is absurd. He is a Muslim. He is a former radical who became a small d Democrat, was an advisor to 3 British prime ministers. The Quilliam Foundation that he runs is named for a Muslim convert who founded the first mosque in the UK in 1889. He recently was on a televised debate where he defended the proposition that Islam is a religion of peace. To equate him with the Ku Klux Klan, which is what the Southern Poverty Law Center effectively did, is absurd. And this is an organization with a once noble history that did a really important job in the 1970s of taking on, suing the Ku Klux Klan and shutting the Ku Klux Klan down. Now they've run out of Klansmen, and so what they're doing is they're going after people whose political views they disagree with, who tend to be conservatives. And it's become, they put together these shoddy lists, and they besmirch the good names of good people with whom they disagree. And it's become a caricature of itself.
So to its readers, the SPLC has issued an apology and agreed to pay $3.4 million to Nawaz and Quilliam. Is that apology and that payment, is that enough?
It's a start. I mean, they should apologize to a lot of other people. I mean, for example, last year, ABC News ran a story, and this is one of the big problems, is that because of their history, a lot of news organizations treat them as a serious organization when they're no longer a serious organization. So ABC News ran a story saying Jeff Sessions gives speech to anti-LGBT hate group. And if you read the story, they were citing the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were talking about the Alliance Defending Freedom. The Alliance Defending Freedom is a conservative group of lawyers that just won a case in the Supreme Court by 7-2 in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. They're a respected group of conservative lawyers. They're not the Ku Klux Klan. And they keep doing this. They did this to the Family Research Council, where somebody saw that information and went in and shot somebody because of it. What they're doing is not just defamation, it's dangerous. People's lives are at stake when you do this kind of thing.
Do you expect more lawsuits?
I hope so. I hope this will encourage people, because, you know, people seem to be intimidated by this organization because of their history. But now Maajid Nawaz has shown that if you take them to court and threaten to destroy their livelihood and their funding, they're going to back off. And maybe they'll be a little bit more careful now about using this power and this name of theirs that they built many years ago in a good way to attack people who have nothing to do with anything like the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, and I know you've been a big part of following that story for us. So thank you for that, Mark Thiessen.
My
nice
pleasure.
to see you this evening. All right.
Good to see you.
Well, still ahead, do you see anything wrong with the message on this billboard? Wait till you hear why they were ordered to be taken down. That's coming up. Plus, more and more Republicans are seeing success running on the Trump agenda in 2018. But what about those who don't? Ronna McDaniel, chairwoman of the RNC, joins us exclusively next.
We need to have a Republican majority in the House. Otherwise, it's going to be Nancy Pelosi, who will bring impeachment proceedings, who will do everything she can to shut down the Trump agenda.